There's not a word you'll hear from my lips that often. No, it's not sorry or even oops. Rather, it is hubris. Now, if you're about to race for a dictionary, let me save you that endeavour. This ancient Greek expression can now be summed up in just two words: Tony and Blair. Those ghastly, overacting tones of Tony polluted our airwaves again last weekend. He teased the audience that he might, steady now, matron, be ready to come back to politics. What don't you get, Mr. Blair, the former peace envoy to the Middle East, who actually ushered in more carnage in the region in his disastrous term than was to many imaginable? You caused Brexit. You promised migration from Eastern Europe would be in the low thousands, yet we gave up counting when it equalled the population of Iceland. You are to today's political scene what Kim Jong-un is to world peace and Ilia Nastasi is to tolerance. You're toxic. As a fan of education, 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 please learn this lesson. It's time to say bye-bye, Blair, and allow you to go off and count the millions you've made since leaving office.
I think somebody once said that seeing Nicole Kidman naked on stage was pure theatrical Viagra. And I think Blair is political Ebola. I mean, he just does it. And I think he sort of knows now that everybody's going to have your knee-jerk reaction that, you know, he's completely toxic and he's got to clear off. I don't have that view. I think that he is the master. I mean, he is the master. If you just listen or read what he says and just pretend it's not Tony Blair saying it, to me, every word makes perfect sense.
Tell me what makes sense, Rach.
Well, what he was saying in his interview with Adam Bolton this morning on Sky. Let's have a look at it.
I think the real issue is blank cheque. It's what mandate does she claim, both on Brexit and on the health service, education and all the other things. And I think the most powerful argument for Labour in this election, because of the way the polls are and the way the opinion polls are on the leadership issue, the most powerful argument for Labour is to say it's important for our democracy that the government's held properly to account and she needs a strong opposition. OK,
so what I feel here is that what we've got is the coalition of chaos. And what we saw in France is that the two mainstream parties were beaten by an independent. That is not happening in this election. So we definitely need Blair to represent the middle ground, an authoritative, analytical voice, which he does very well in the absence of anybody else spelling out the reality of this election, which is that it's going to completely eliminate the opposition unless people are a bit tactical.
Michelle's glaring at you.
But I just think that his brand to so many people is toxic.
Don't disagree.
So whilst the message that he might be trying to deliver may to some people be sound, the messenger that's trying to deliver that, people just don't want to hear from because they blame him for various different things and all the rest of it.
So, I mean, Rachel, I can count you on my side then. Never mind the message. I hear what you say about a centrist, mate.
You're shooting the messenger.
Shooting the messenger.
This is the bloke you can...
You know him.
I know him.
You know
I've had a sort of love-hate relationship. I helped fund his original campaign to be leader of the Labour Party, so I go back a long way. And then I went to the whole thing at the BBC where I saw him as the enemy.
Yes, quite as friendly then, was it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite as friendly then. And then I think it's a Shakespearean character, actually, Blair, because I think he had it all and blew it, gave it away.
Did he?
I think the invasion of Iraq, a desperate mistake. History, I mean, there's no one you can find today that would say...
Do you think he still thinks he was right, Greg?
Oh, well, he still says he's right.
No, but come on. Do you think in the dark night of the...
I think he... Well, I haven't had tea with him for some years now. I think he probably does. I think to this day he believes he was right, and yet you look at the mess that is the Middle East, and he was partly responsible. So, Iraq... And then I think going around the world really advising any sort of despot he could find, as long as they paid him enough, plus demanding vast sums of money for speeches, I think has totally damaged him and damaged the brand. However, during Brexit, for instance, during the whole campaign, if he'd been on our side, if he'd been on the side of the Remainers, the old Blair, we'd have won.
The old Blair, but not
the old Blair, not the new Blair.
But Greg, was he deluded to say that he could come back in and he was tempted to come back into politics?
Oh, I think he's completely deluded. I don't think he has a prayer.
Interesting enough, it's almost 20 years to the day since he was made Prime. I think it's next week, one of our colleagues was saying. So that's how far back we go. We'll look back at those 20 years in a moment. Carol.
Yeah,
Rachel just said, pretend it's not Blair saying this. Well, no one in this country will ever be able to pretend it's not Blair because of his history. Many people still hold him personally responsible for the death of British servicemen in this country. His message, and every day, this is a man who, preaches one message and then he talks about he is responsible for Brexit. You're totally right. He was the one who led everyone. But what he did last week when he urged voters to back any party that wanted to smash Brexit.
Good idea.
Really? So how disrespectful to the people of this country. There's no such thing as hard Brexit.
I agree.
I get so sick of hearing hard Brexit. Okay,
I agree.
But he was urging the people of this country to go across the democratic will of the people. He also stuffed Labour in saying that. No. He condemned his own party.
I don't think he did that. I think what he did. I mean, I'm not here to defend.
He's telling people.
This is a rare moment.
It's a rare moment in my life that I end up defending.
This is TV gold. He's now going to defend Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. But what he was basically saying is some things are more important than party. And in his case, being a Remainer, is more important than party, and that therefore you need to bring together those on your side. I mean, I've long believed that the party system in this country is quite damaging to our electoral politics because, actually, I mean, for instance, over Europe, the Tories should have split years ago. The Labour Party, Labour now.
But the hypocrisy of him now trying to smash Brexit when he's the very person who caused Brexit. He changed the mood on immigration in this country in 2004 by not allowing transitional controls. We were the only country, Germany did, and lots of other countries did, and they had a steady flow of people. He changed the way people think about immigration. Brexit is his fault, and yet now he's trying to smash it.
I'm not sure I believe that. I mean, if you look at...
What don't you believe?
Well, I sat at a lecture fairly recently from a guy from Oxford, a professor from Oxford, who basically said if you looked at any time in the history of the EU and you'd taken a referendum, you could have lost. You could have lost. And actually, the campaign last year didn't make much difference. Boris's bust didn't make much difference in the rest of it. Actually, you would have lost. There's always been amongst a large part of this country, not necessarily the majority, but amongst a large part, a nervousness and a concern about being in Europe.
But what frightens me about Blair is he doesn't seem to understand what people think about him. And that's scary, I think, when you have no self-awareness. Friends once described him as a narcissist with a messiah complex, and I believe he's still like that.
Well, he's getting a future. What do you describe as political Ebola? Well, listen, I mentioned earlier it's 2 decades since the days of Tony Blair. Strap yourself in, friends. We're getting into a time capsule because he really does belong then in another era. Let's remind ourselves of what else was happening back in 1997. Titanic was breaking box office records. The Spice Girls were bringing girl power to the top of the charts. And speaking of the Spice Girls, David Beckham was just a young footballer in a dodgy suit. Rachel, coming back to you. So you like the message, you don't like the man. Who would be the man or the woman, apologies, who could deliver that centrist message?
Well, it's so sad, isn't it? I mean, who is there? Let's just... In 4 statistics.
Go on.
He was leader for 13 years. He won 3 general elections.
But he's yesterday.
He overturned 18 years of Tory rule, and he was returned with a 179-seat majority. By any reckoning, he is a titan.
His political vision is now washed up. He's out of touch with the needs of modern Britain. Well, he's yesterday's man.
I mean, in the end, the events of Iraq and the events of what happened in the Middle East afterwards destroyed Blair.
Sure.
Yes.
Anyway,